Hello Internet, welcome back. This is Sierra.
And Mr.
And on our channel today, I guess you guys probably already know what we're going to be doing, but you are watching part 2 of our China adoption series. If you guys are new around here, I'm Sierra, this is Mr. And we have our little man in the other room hanging out playing with his toys right now. And every week on our channel, we try to make a new video about our life in Japan, lush being vegan, and trying to live a little bit more sustainably. Right now, as you guys clicked on it, you guys know that we're in the middle of filming a China adoption series. And we decided to make this series because we know a lot of families want to adopt, but when we were looking for information about adoption, we couldn't find very much about personal experience on the internet, so we decided that we wanted to make these videos to help at least one family. And if that's something that you're interested in, awesome. If not, I'm glad you're still here anyway. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Anyways, in today's video, we're going to be doing a basic overview of the China adoption process. We started our personal adoption process in May 2018, and we brought our son home with us in October of 2019. So it was about a year and a half for us. Our adoption process took a little longer than normal just because we are an expat family living overseas, and that added a lot to our timeline because how long the mail takes to get here from the United States. In the US, usually it takes about 3 days for a piece of paper to get from one place to the other. To get a piece of paper from the United States to Japan, it takes 10 days to 2 weeks, so that added a ton of time. Things that should have taken a week or more, it took us almost a month to get done because of the mail. So anyways, that's what made our timeline a little bit longer, but today we are going to go over kind of the basic overall process for the China program. Make sure that you do take everything we say with a grain of salt, just because of the fact that every adoption agency does work a little bit differently, and even within the time that we started and finished our process, there were some changes to the process along timelines and laws and stuff. So that being said, again, take everything we say with a grain of salt. This is just our experience. So I guess let's just get to it.
Sounds good.
Again, this is the process that worked for us as expats living in Japan. Another thing that we should mention, we do live on an American military base, and so technically our house is American soil, which is why our process was so similar. If you are an American living overseas, your process might be a little bit different. Just make sure you reach out to your agency because they will know what to do. So yeah, we're going to start.
Let's get started.
All right, so what's the first step in the adoption process?
So the first step in the adoption process is actually finding an adoption agency. As soon as you have an adoption agency, you can actually go into the search basis of trying to find a child, setting up applications, etc., etc.
Yeah, and I think we are going to do a video on each step, or at least part of a video on every single step of this process to help you guys who are interested or curious to understand what took so long and why it took so long. But I think we are going to do a video specifically on picking out an agency because that's something I feel like we should have put more energy into, but we'll explain that in a different video. So first step you said was the application process.
Yep, so as soon as you find a agency to go with for your adoption process, you need to start off with an application. Most agencies, if not all agencies, will require you to fill out some sort of application in order to initiate the progress. Once you have an application process and you've been accepted, then you start with an orientation. An orientation, they like to meet with you, they will might ask you some questions, depending on if you're going with a Christian agency or not. You may have to do a statement of faith. And there's also some training that might be involved with the orientation.
And the orientation process does have a fee, of course, once you put your initial application in. And the whole purpose of that is to make sure that you're choosing the right agency. Not only that you like them, but also that they want to work with you. Also, within the orientation process, it's not just about them getting to know you. You also do a little bit of training about the country that you're going to be adopting from. I think we read multiple pages about the history of China and like the history of adoption in China and how like the adoption process was created in China, which was repetitive because we'd researched that already, but I found it helpful because I feel like a lot of families don't necessarily research that, and it helps you to understand why the process works the way that it does.
Absolutely. It was very eye-opening to see the different policies and laws in place that have affected China over the years, and to see kind of where your child is coming from.
Yeah. And why there's so many hoops to jump through throughout this process, because of course when there are no hoops, then there's a lot of mistakes, so, and people who shouldn't get through. So I'm thankful for all of the hoops. It just was really hard and really exhausting. Oh yeah, they also had us within the orientation process, before we even started our home study, we had to read a book called The Connected Child, which I have a theory that the author has some kind of like contract with all the agencies. I mean, it is an amazing book, don't get me wrong, it's an amazing book, but why else would every agency recommend this book for everyone to read.
Maybe it's a good book. I don't know.
Alright, moving on to the second start of the adoption process. Now, these next few steps can kind of be done not quite at the same time, but kind of interchangeably, and we'll get there in a second. But the second step to the adoption process officially is your home study. And the home study is, I wrote down a definition and I don't want to get it wrong, so I'm going to read it from my paper, is a comprehensive document that describes your family, background, and the life that you are building for your future child, or the life you're going to share with your future child. So it has like a lot of background checks, more research, reading lists, all that kind of stuff. Basically, what they're going to do is check you up, down, around, and make sure that you're a good family for a child, which can feel really invasive, and we are going to talk a little bit more about that in our video about that specifically, but that's pretty much what the home study is. And you will need your home study for one of the next steps moving forward.
Next, we had to do an I-100A, which is basically a pre-approval from the USCIS to get your child legally classified as a U.S. citizen.
Right. As he said, it basically, you're asking USCIS, which is the United States Customs Immigration people, hey, can we bring some kid into our family as a citizen to the United States? And you have to have that pre-approval for the next phases. The I-100A specific form is only for Hague accredited countries or agencies. China is a Hague country, so if you're adopting from China to the United States, you have to use this form. And then the next part of the adoption process is very flexible. And we did this part before we did the second part, which is the dossier, and that is the letter of intent. And that letter of intent comes into play when it's time for your matching process. We were matched with our child in July of 2018. Yep. And they changed the law in October 2018. As far as we know, China is no longer doing like pre-matches for their adoptions. What we were able to do is when we signed up with our agency, they had a child like kind of on their waiting list that matched our specifications, and so we were able to file that letter of intent immediately before we started our dossier to file for our specific child. And the letter of intent, basically, it's kind of like a cut and pasted type form. All you really have to write in is your child's name, and they give you pretty much exactly what you have to write into a paragraph. So all these letters are pretty much the same. You have to say, we want to adopt this child, we're aware of this child's medical needs, and we won't abuse the child, we won't abandon the child, all that kind of verbiage that you have to have in there. Yep. And once that comes back, the CCWA, yeah, but it's the China Children's Welfare Institute, will give you a letter with your future child's name on it, with your names on it. And then for us, we had 6 months in which we could file our dossier. That may or may not still be the same, but that's just what happened in our specific circumstance. So we had that 6 months to file that paperwork, and then you move on to the dossier. So what's the dossier? That's the most important and pinnacle part of the entire adoption process. So Mr. is gonna explain what it is.
So really quickly, the dossier is basically just the whole package all together. It has your home study, it has your background checks, it has your I-800A, it has everything in together, which goes to the CCCWA for approval.
Yeah, and the dossier is similar to your home study, where you have to have basic copies of all of these documents. But that's why I said that a lot of these steps are kind of done at the same time, because documents that you collect for your home study are similar or pretty much the same as the documents you're going to be collecting for your dossier. So it's really important that like at the end of your home study, you order all of those documents at the same time so you can use them both for your home study and for your dossier. Because like you guys will hear in our video, some of these official documents are only good for 6 months. Why? I don't know, but those certified copies are only valid for that time. And if they expire, then you have to order them again. Yep. And that's expensive. Yeah, we won't discuss that. It's awful. Anyway, yeah, so that's the dossier. And I don't know if you said this, but the dossier is basically your official application to adopt from China. Now we're going to move on to the next part. So this is where I said it's going to get a little bit tricky. With our adoption process, we had our LOI done before we did our dossier, and we were able to include that in our dossier so we could move forward in the process. But from what I have heard, what's happening now is once your dossier is submitted, or about the same time, is when you receive your official match, and that's when you write your LOI. So theoretically, after you get your dossier sent in and you get your LOI sent in, you wait again, and you will get something eventually called the letter of acceptance, right? Mm-hmm. And what is a letter of acceptance?
It's basically them confirming your case and approving you for an adoption in China.
And the day we got our LOA, we were both jumping up and down, like screaming. It was one of the happiest days of our lives.
Yep.
That was amazing. And then once your LOA comes in the mail, it has like your name, your child's name. Oh, and I didn't mention this before, but when you fill out your dossier paperwork, there's a form that, I don't remember what the name of the form is, and one of the forms you have to write in your child's future English name, or which name you're going to use for them legally in the United States. And that name is what's going to be on your letter of acceptance. So that's really important to write. And so if you're planning on waiting to meet your child to choose their name, you can't really, unfortunately. Now that may have changed since we adopted, but our son's only been home for a few months, so I'm assuming that's still the same.
Yeah, worst comes to worst, you can just go to the legal office and get it changed. So.
Yeah, that's true. Once your child's citizenship comes through, you have to go to the Social Security office. So I assume that just like when you get married, you can change it to whatever you want.
Yeah.
So what comes next?
I-800.
How's that different from the I-800A? Isn't it the same paper?
Good question. I-800A is kind of like a pre-approval. I-800, when you send it off, is for the final approval. So.
Yeah, it's like you're saying, so you know how you guys said that we could like bring this kid to the US? Well, like, can we actually bring this kid to the US or into our family? And then you send it in, and at that point, they already told you yes at your pre-approval, and so it's possible that they'll say no, but in most cases, or all the cases of people who have adopted from China that we know of, they said yes. You might get something called a RFE, which is a request for evidence, and we did get an RFE, and basically all they wanted to know is they wanted to confirm that our child was in fact an orphan, and all we had to do was get a piece of paper from his Children Welfare Institute saying that he was found and he was an abandoned child. We sent it in and then it came back within just a few weeks, so that was pretty quick. I have heard recently RFEs are becoming more and more common in the China adoption process, and we don't necessarily know why. I just know that a lot of families that we have talked throughout the process were getting them. And then after the I-100A, you get the big, like basically your go, which is your travel approval, which comes not from China, it comes from your adoption agency. Before you get your travel approval, you have to do, I think it's like a travel packet where they brief you on like if you should get certain vaccines for certain regions, what those are, like health stuff for going to China. They tell you don't drink the water, all of that stuff, and they help you choose your hotels. Some agencies actually don't give you a choice in the hotels you're going to stay in, so that's all in the travel approval packet. And you also go through and you create your itinerary for the trip, and so they'll tell you what you're going to do each day, and once everyone signs off on it, that's when they give you a document that's officially your travel approval. And then what happens after you get travel approval? You go to China and you meet your child, and then you travel to their province, and then you travel to Guangzhou, you get their visa, and you fly home. And it takes between 10 and 14 days-ish, depending on where your child lives and what day of the week it is you arrive in China. All right, so that is, in a nutshell, the Reader's Digest version of the China adoption process. Is there anything else we should add, or you want to add?
No, I think it's good.
Yeah, as we already said, we are going to be making more videos on each of the steps. Again, I just want to reiterate, even though there was a disclaimer in the beginning of the video, this is our experience, so please do not take what we say as like law. Please find an agency and research it yourself, because we don't want to hear from you, but you said this, and we're going to come back and say, we told you to research it yourself and take it with a grain of salt. Again, our goal with this series is to help as many families answer as many questions as we can. So if you guys have any questions in general about the China adoption process, please feel free to write them into the comment section or send us a message on one of our social media handles, which you can find in the description, and we're going to use those in a Q&A or two, depending. We'll see. Other than that, I think we're all set.
Yep.
Yeah. So if you guys are still watching to the end, thank you guys so much. Make sure to like and subscribe, and we will see you soon with another video. Bye.